a press release I want to read. A Voice of America employee, Seth Jason, has been arrested and indicted for threatening Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to assassinate Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene using phones at the VOA studios to threaten Greene and her staff. The phone calls came from inside the Voice of America studios and control room, where threats were made to the district offices of Congressman Greene over a 15-month period. The indictment says the Voice of America employee threatened to kidnap and use firearms to kill Congressman Greene, her staff, and their families. The call started during the Biden administration in October of 2023, with the last call coming the day after President Trump was inaugurated. Seth Jason, the VOA employee, is going to face a judge, I guess, late this afternoon, or maybe even as we speak. If convicted, he could face nearly 20 years in a federal prison. Kari Lake, the head of Voice of America, joins us. Kari, what is going on here, ma'am?
It's incredibly disturbing. I've known about this investigation for over a month, but have had to pretty much keep some of the details quiet while they worked on the investigation, because the goal was to arrest a dangerous person and take them off the streets. And the arrest came, it looks like, early this morning. It was a VOA employee, Seth Jason. He's charged with a series of federal charges, including influencing a federal official by threatening a family member, influencing a federal official by threat, interstate communications with a threat to kidnap or injure, and anonymous telecommunications harassment. Those combined come with 27 years behind bars if he is found guilty. These are allegations right now, but we became aware of this a couple of months ago when the Capitol Police showed up at the VOA headquarters and mentioned that there had been threats that had come from the phone lines at Voice of America over about a 15-month period from October of 2024 right up until January 21st, the day after President Trump was inaugurated, threatening phone calls that were going, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, to Marjorie Taylor Greene's home office, which is in Georgia, threatening the people who worked with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congressman from Georgia, threatening her, death threats, and including threatening their families as well. Now, the indictment names Seth Jason, a longtime employee at Voice of America. He has been relieved and let go. Of course, we're downsizing at that agency. 85% of the workforce since I got there has been eliminated or told they will be terminated. He's one of them. And I believe he is now in police custody. If he hasn't already appeared before a judge, he will be appearing before a judge in the coming hours today.
Okay, it says in the release it was October of 2023, not 24. Is that, do you have later information?
Yes. I got that wrong.
October
yes,
23.
Yes, October
Here's my
23.
question. We know that, we know you've gone in to drop the hammer over there and to downsize the place and to get at all the people that hate America out of there. But where's the supervision when you have a guy that's making death threats to a congressman's office? Were there any controls on this place? Well, particularly when they says it came from the control room, the phone calls came from the control room. I mean, what was, and it stopped immediately upon President Trump taking office and you guys going over there. What was this place like? How was it run before you got there? I mean, how's a guy for, a year and a half, right? Almost 2 years? Sit there and make death threats about it, not just her, but her family, her employees and their families, ma'am.
Well, this is somebody who is a technician and understands that, there's a lot of phones in a newsroom, and there's many newsrooms at Voice of America. And I'm assuming that he understood which phones were directly connected to an employee and which ones weren't. When you have phone lines in studios and in control rooms where dozens of people show up every day, and that phone line is not directly connected to one employee, it would be easier to make threatening phone calls if indeed he is found guilty of such allegations. So this is a person who knew about where the phone lines that would be connected and tied to an individual and ones that are more for use with the general staff and it looks like those threatening calls, death threats, mind you, to a sitting member of Congress were made out of Voice of America. Now let's just take a step back here and look at the bias in the media that we've seen for so long. And the bias has leaned in one direction. When I was asked about this during my congressional hearing about 3 weeks ago, I mentioned in my opening remarks that I had recently learned that Voice of America had become the scene of a crime, according to Capitol Police, and that I was very disturbed to hear that threatening phone calls had been made to a sitting member of Congress. None of the Democrats on that committee asked me any questions about it. It was Chairman Mast who said, wait a minute, tell me more about that. You're telling me that somebody who works at Voice of America made threatening phone calls to a member of Congress? He was the only one interested in getting more information, to which time I told him about what I knew about it. And he said, may I ask, were they threatening a Democrat or a Republican? And I said, well, I'll let you guess based on what you've heard. We've seen so much hatred towards conservatives coming from the mainstream media, coming from the media in general, and that somebody would feel so emboldened that they would make phone calls. If this turns out to be true and a conviction is made against this man, that he would feel so emboldened that he felt comfortable enough to do that from inside of a newsroom is shocking. It tells you the state of the American newsroom in 2025.
He was someone you'd already designated was going to be part of the downsizing?
Yes, he'd been on administrative leave, and I understand that he had been given a notice for reduction in force. So he's not working in the building right now. He was arrested, it looks like, potentially from his home, but I'm not sure. He was arrested in Maryland. Now, here is a real shocker that I learned in reading through some of the information I've got. He was a volunteer reserve officer for the Anne Arundel, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, County Police. So he was a reserve officer, a volunteer reserve officer. They have now announced that he is no longer with them. They've terminated their, his volunteership with their police force. So this is a guy who worked at Voice of America, was volunteering at a county police facility, and according to this indictment, was making death threats to a sitting member of Congress and her staff and their families. Can you imagine the horror of these people who have to work and sit in this office where they're getting death threats made against them, threatening kidnapping and death by using a gun?
Has, in your investigation, and maybe you can't tell us this, because in your investigation, have you found out what other employees, if any, knew about it and are actually accessories after the fact?
What I can tell you is that when Capitol Police came in, they had a recording of the phone calls that were made. And they initially played them to a member who works in our security who did not know or recognize the voice, because this member of our security hadn't been there long enough to really get to know the employees. Now, mind you, the vast majority of people who work at Voice of America, many of them, English is their second language. Some don't even speak English. And so many of the employees, when they do speak English, they have accents. This was a very much sounding an English-speaking, very much American. It sounded like an American employee. And so the member of security sent the Capitol Police over to other members of our staff who'd been there for a long time, who were able to identify the voice and at least steer them in the right direction for who this could be. And I think possibly using records of when people clock in and clock out, they were able to pinpoint who they should arrest in this case.
Not that the Capitol Hill Police don't have a record for being the cutting edge of investigations, but did the FBI take this over? I mean, the charges there doesn't sound like the most serious charges, which he threatened to assassinate a federal official, a sitting member of Congress. Did the FBI take over this investigation? Have you dealt directly with the FBI on this?
Not that I know of. I have been in contact with U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, Judge Jeanine, we all know and love, and I made her aware of this. She was aware of it, but I had inquired about it, saying, is there going to be any movement on this case just a couple of days ago? And then I had some contact with her briefly today where she let me know that the indictment was being unsealed and that an arrest had been made. So that's what tipped me off that the arrest had happened. I informed Congresswoman Green that the arrest had happened, and she was very relieved. As you can imagine, she gets a lot of hatred from the left, unfortunately, for doing her job and representing the people of her district. I'm going to be addressing the media here tonight. I believe I have to double check the time at 7 o'clock up at the Capitol. And at this time, Congresswoman Green plans to join me, or we will do a press conference and address some of the persistent threats that she's received, and then the horror to find out that the American taxpayer paid the salaries of the people who work at VOA. Their salaries come 100% from the American taxpayer, and if convicted, and if these charges hold and stick and are true, this man would have been making these threatening calls, threatening the lives of a congresswoman and her team from phone lines that are paid for by the American taxpayer. It goes to the heart of some of the deep problems in the media, some of this heavy bias in the media, and now it's moving beyond bias. We're seeing it with other outlets as well. Downright hatred for anybody who is America first, who supports President Trump. It's just appalling, and it's got to stop. You know, we've been called a lot of names over the years. We certainly have. But it seems like when we're looking at some of the domestic terrorism, it seems to be coming from one side, really aimed toward people who are conservative, and it's got to stop. It's absolutely wrong, and I hope that if convicted, with the sentence, which comes with about 27 years behind bars, that the judge throws the book at this person. We need to show people that when you do something like this, when you make threats, when you threaten to assassinate somebody, you will face the harshest sentence possible. And I'd like to see this happen in this case to show that we will not stand for this anymore. We're done. We're sick and tired of it. We're sick and tired of the threats, and they're coming primarily from one side aimed toward us.